Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 852. 5 seconds is an eternity. Sure enough, the instant Leo stumbled to a halt, a prickling sense of dread crawled up his spine. He felt it before he understood it. A predator's pressure locking onto him from behind. Unfortunately, he was still reeling from the recoil of his failed skill, muscles refusing to respond, body frozen in that awful half-second where intention meant nothing. He could not turn. He could not raise his guard. Even so, his reaction speed was still frighteningly fast. Celestial brew. Fortifying brew. He barked, fingers flying. One glowing bottle tore free from his belt and spun through the air, light streaking behind it. The second name barely left his lips. A crimson-clawed paw, shimmering with murderous intent, smashed into the small of his back. Riot. Flesh split open in a savage line along Leo's spine. Blood sprayed outward as the force of the blow drove the air from his lungs. Pain flared, then vanished as the trauma overwhelmed him. His consciousness snuffed out before he even hit the ground. It was Ethan's rake. Under normal circumstances, the skill merely applied a bleeding effect, a steady drain meant to pressure rather than finish. From stealth, however, rake became something else entirely. It carried a brutal stun, a feral opener that functioned much like a rogue's ambush, though without sacrificing the bleed. Rogues had to choose. Ambush for control, garrote for damage over time. In the wild, most chose control. A feral druid did not have to compromise. A stealth rake delivered solid upfront damage, applied a bleed, and stunned the target all at once. The stun was shorter than a rogue's, 5 seconds instead of 6, but for someone like Ethan, who had dumped every last attribute point into agility, 5 seconds might as well have been an afternoon nap. More than enough. If he could not end someone inside 5 seconds, he might as well uninstall. Decades of virtual life as a rogue in another world had honed his burst windows into muscle memory. Each sequence sharpened until there was no wasted motion left. Yet as his claws tore in, something immediately felt wrong. The damage numbers were bad. Against the Brewmaster earlier, a single shred had crit for over 3,000. Against Leo, the numbers barely crept past 1,000. Damage absorption, 50%. Even so, 3 separate numbers popped above Leo's body. One belonged to the rake bleed ticking away. Another marked the raw damage from shred itself. The third, glowing yellow, bounced oddly from a small icon beside Leo's health bar. A frothing mug that sloshed as if half full. His stagger pool. All 3 numbers were underwhelming, but at least they were numbers. 1,000 damage, though, against a tank with 40,000 health was a mosquito bite at best. Ethan clicked his tongue, irritation flashing through him. So you shove damage into a booze meter. Fine. Let's see how much your liver can take. The panther reared up onto its hind legs, mirroring the posture Ethan had used against the Brewmaster earlier. Its rear paws braced against Leo's kidneys for leverage, claws digging in, while the front limbs became a blur of motion. Shred. Shred. 2 more savage swipes ripped forward, angling for the throat. Plate-armored warriors wore reinforced gorgets and layered steel around the neck. A leather-clad monk did not enjoy that luxury. The claws found purchase, opening twin arterial lines as blood sprayed across the ground. Ethan's eyes flicked to the numbers as they appeared, only to be greeted by a line of text he had already come to despise. Celestial brew shield absorbed. He's not even losing health yet. Every ounce of damage was being siphoned into the stagger pool, but the yellow number bouncing from the mug icon was climbing rapidly now, swelling with every strike. Leo's defenses were not negating the damage so much as delaying the bill. A rake, 3 shreds, then a 5-point savage bite to cap it off. At last, the stagger ticks broke into 4 digits, cracking past 1,000 per tick. 3 seconds had already passed. Inside the stun, Leo was fully aware. He watched his stagger pool balloon out of control, cold sweat forming as calculations raced through his mind. Right then, his celestial brew shield shattered with an audible pop, the protective sheen vanishing as his health bar finally began to slide downward. 2 seconds left. He had a plan. Purifying brew the instant the stun ended, cleansing 50% of the stored stagger damage. He could hold 2 charges. 2 fast gulps would wipe out 75% of it. He could survive the burst if he executed cleanly. Ethan had no intention of letting him execute anything. With 2 seconds of stun remaining, Ethan triggered Enrage, a skill unavailable on the live servers. Energy surged back into his body, instantly restoring 80% of his reserves while supercharging regeneration. His attack speed and damage both spiked by 20%. At the same time, another icon flared to life, Tiger's Fury. A short-duration burst cooldown, 8 seconds long with a 20-second recovery. Tiger's Fury was usually woven casually into rotations. Ethan had deliberately held it. When activated, it restored 20% energy and increased the potency of his abilities by another 20%. The effect was immediate and violent. Combined with Enrage, Ethan's nearly empty energy bar snapped to full in a heartbeat. The real burst began. His claws became a storm of shreds, each one slamming home faster and harder than the last. Under the dual buffs, damage numbers leapt upward, scratches becoming tearing gashes that ripped for over 1,500 apiece. Leo's panic deepened into something close to terror. Every point of direct damage Ethan inflicted was mirrored into his stagger pool. He had assumed his absorption was 70%, only to realize far too late that PvP rules cut it down to 50. He had meant to chain Celestial Brew into Fortifying Brew to push that number higher, but Ethan had never given him the breathing room. In the final sliver of the stun, Ethan's combo points capped out at 5 once more. Leo's body finally unlocked. Purifying BR. Purify this, Ethan growled. Leo's hand was halfway to his mouth, fingers tight around the purifying brew, when a system prompt exploded across his vision. Ding! You have been affected by MAME. Duration: 6 seconds. You have got to be kidding me. Leo screamed internally as his body locked up again. Ethan caught the duration and smiled. So Tiger's Fury boosts crowd control too. Normally, MAME stunned for 5 seconds at maximum combo points. 6 seconds was a gift. 6 seconds was an eternity. Enrage still had time left. Leo had become a practice dummy. When the 6 seconds finally burned away, Leo forced his arm to move again, desperation overriding everything else. He had to drink. The stagger ticks were now slamming for over 2,500 each, and his health had already dropped to half. Another MAME slammed into him. Because the skills were chained so closely, this one lasted only 2.5 seconds. It hardly mattered. Leo knew with absolute clarity that it was over. As the short stun ended, Ethan suddenly shifted forms. Bone and muscle warped as he became a bear, the transformation generating just enough rage to fuel a single devastating attack. Crunch. Bash effect applied. Stunned for 3 seconds. I'm done, Leo thought, watching his health bar tremble at the 50% mark. 3 seconds was all it took. Even if Ethan stopped attacking entirely, the stagger damage alone, now ticking for over 3,000 every half second, would finish the job. There was one cruel quirk to the stagger mechanic. When his health reached 1, it would stop falling. Without fresh direct damage, he technically would not die. Ethan took a single, deliberate step back. He stopped attacking. Leo's health plummeted as the delayed damage paid its due. 10%. 5. 1. And then it held. Ethan blinked. He's still standing? The stun wore off. Leo swayed on his feet, alive by a single point of health. Relief flooded him as he looked up. Thanks, boss, for spar. He never finished the sentence. Ethan had not spared him out of mercy. He had simply misjudged the mechanic. The moment Leo spoke, Ethan shifted again, feathers puffing out as he took on owl form. The round, pudgy creature lifted 2 absurdly short wings and pointed them straight at Leo. Typhoon. A violent gust of wind exploded outward. The damage was negligible, normally harmless. Against a target with exactly 1 health, it was lethal. Leo's body was hurled backward, limbs going slack as his character died midair, a lifeless ragdoll tumbling before it even hit the ground. A true flying corpse. Chapter 853, 16 seconds to silence. That entire fight left the schadenfreude crowd bitterly disappointed. The kind of disappointment that lingered in the air like a bad aftertaste. They had come hoping to see Ethan stumble, to watch the so-called rising star finally get humbled. And instead they were sent packing with nothing but frustration, and a few clipped replays burned into their retinas. Ethan's fans, on the other hand, were practically vibrating with excitement, buzzing like they had mainlined adrenaline straight into their veins. Chat windows flooded with breathless commentary. Replay counters ticked upward, and the same stunned observations were repeated again and again as if saying them often enough might make them even more unbelievable. 16.5 seconds of uninterrupted chain crowd control. Maximum burst output, timed with ruthless precision. Every single strike landing cleanly on a weak point. Even a 50,000 HP tank would have crumpled under that kind of pressure, let alone Skyblade. Honestly, that was the real tragedy for them. Skyblade had gone down too fast. They wished he had held on just a little longer, just enough to let Ethan reveal more of the Druid God's toolkit. What other control skills was he hiding? How deep did the lockdown chain really go? What was the theoretical ceiling of that suffocating control loop? That final typhoon could not possibly have been the end. It was a universal skill, usable in any form. Ethan had not needed to shift into owl form to cast it. He had done so deliberately, and that meant there had to be something else queued up afterward, some follow-up that never got the chance to see the light of day. Instead, the fight ended too cleanly, too efficiently. To them, it felt less like a duel and more like watching a flawlessly executed macro, or worse, a beautifully disguised hack that left no room for error and no space for spectacle. Infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. A man growled, slamming his fist into his open palm as if Skyblade's avatar might somehow feel it retroactively. "What's got you so worked up, buddy?" Someone beside him asked, half amused. "Skyblade," the man snapped, teeth clenched. He wasn't durable enough. No staying power at all. His companion stared at him for a moment, then rolled his eyes so hard it looked like it hurt. "Did you already forget about the first guy who went up? The one who didn't even last 3 seconds. The complainer froze mid-rant, his mouth hanging open. As his voice died out, several nearby spectators turned to look, curiosity sharpening into recognition. Someone squinted, then snapped their fingers. "Hey, wait a second. Aren't you that 2-second man from earlier?" Dozens of gazes snapped toward him at once. The loudest critic of Skyblade's masculinity and endurance was, in fact, the very first berserker Ethan had dismantled in under 3 seconds flat. Realization hit him like a truck. His shoulders slumped, his posture collapsing inward as if he could physically shrink away from the attention. A second later, his avatar began to fade, transparency creeping up from his feet to his head. He logged out of the spectator arena without another word. Back in the dueling ring, Ethan glanced at Leo and offered him a faint, knowing smile. Leo could only shrug helplessly in return, a mixture of resignation and admiration written all over his avatar's face. Almost in perfect sync, both of their figures began to dissolve as well. A system message flashed across the field of view for everyone still watching. "Ding! The room owner has left. This room will be disbanded by the system in 3 minutes." A quick look at the in-game clock confirmed it. The official ethereal servers had just gone live. Without any further chatter or ceremony, the remaining spectators logged out one after another, the arena emptying in a matter of seconds. Several enterprising players had already moved faster than the rest, recording both of Ethan's duels and uploading them to the official ethereal forums. Within minutes, those clips ignited yet another firestorm of discussion, speculation, and heated debate. Ethan did not bother to check any of it. What mattered to him was the unexpected bonus he had gained. The duels had proven to be a surprisingly effective tool for sharpening his combat instincts. Even if most challengers were mediocre at best, repeated live combat helped refine his timing and reinforce muscle memory for his newly acquired skills. No one understood this better than he did. In ethereal, abilities were not just lines of code. They were directly tied to real-world capability and perception. He was not like other energy users. Ethereal had forged him, shaped him, and honed him into what he was. When he logged back in, he spawned on the familiar hill overlooking his fortress. The massive stronghold sprawled before him, all 4 gates thrown wide open, streams of players flowing in and out without pause. The sheer traffic alone rivaled the main gates of Harmony City, and that was no exaggeration. The fortress's location was the real prize. Positioned due south of the city, it sat squarely within prime level 45 to 60 monster spawning territory, the current sweet spot for the upper echelon of the player base. A fortress lived or died by its location. Proximity to efficient grind zones meant everything. In a game where your free Hearthstone came with a brutal 12-hour cooldown, time wasted traveling back to a capital city for supplies was a silent killer. Even Guild Hall Hearthstones shared that same limitation. For most players, the first hour of every session vanished into tedious queues at overpriced NPC vendors during peak hours. Without consumables and repairs, you simply could not function. Owning a fortress right next to your grind zone changed all of that. No more marathon runs back to town, no more bleeding time for basic necessities. As Ethan passed through his own front gate, his gaze swept across the open land just inside the walls. It was already bustling with activity. Players had set up makeshift stalls wherever there was space, while others shouted recruitment messages, forming and reforming parties on the fly. Perfect. The chaotic, vibrant scene drew a genuine smile from him. This was exactly how he remembered it, and exactly how he had instructed Celia to manage the area. In his previous life, after his fall from grace, he had been one of those regular players, huddled behind a sad little stall near a fortress gate or desperately scraping together pickup groups. That golden period had not lasted long. Eventually, fortress gates were declared no vending zones, replaced by rows of rented boutique shops that squeezed out independent sellers and funneled profits upward. That was why he had been firm with Celia from the very beginning. The land immediately inside their gates was never to be leased. Any proper shop had to be at least a kilometer away. Watching the thriving community at the entrance, Ethan felt a familiar tug of nostalgia mixed with solidarity. He had been one of them once, worse off than most. He knew exactly how thin the margins were. In this life, he might not be able to fix everything, but he refused to become the kind of greedy landlord who stole away the last scraps of opportunity. He moved deeper into the fortress, walking the full kilometer along the main road. Gradually, permanent structures began to appear, clean and well-organized, lining the thoroughfare. The first set of buildings came into view, 2 on each side of the road. On the left stood all-you-need potions and all-you-need engineering. On the right were all-you-need blacksmithing and all-you-need tailoring. Ethan slowed to a stop, staring at the 2 shops on the right. Since when did we have a blacksmith and a tailor? That mad engineer was really expanding the empire. Was he planning to monopolize every profession shop in the fortress? Ethan rubbed the bridge of his nose, equal parts amused and exasperated. Being an absentee owner certainly had its advantages. He did not even know his own franchise was growing this fast. Still, he had to admit it. No paper on the big one was competent, and more importantly, reliable. Zachary's eye for talent was always sharp. He thought with a smug curl of his lips. Shame I grabbed him this time. Feeling rather pleased with himself, Ethan paused outside the tailoring shop. Tailoring was a goldmine in ethereal. It was not just about stat gear. Tailors controlled cosmetics, glamours, transmogs, pure fashion. Beautiful and exclusive outfits were addictive, and they attracted a very specific, very lucrative demographic. As if on cue, a couple swept past him and entered the shop. Their actual armor was completely hidden beneath lavish, perfectly coordinated ensembles that screamed disposable income. "Welcome to All You Need Tailoring," 2 young greeters chirped in unison from either side of the door, bowing slightly. One of the girls smoothly stepped forward to intercept the glamorous couple, her smile bright and practiced. The other greeter lagged half a step behind, pouting for a split second before her attention slid past Ethan to the player entering behind him. "Welcome to All You Need Tailoring, sir. What kind of look are you going for today?" she said brightly, already ushering the other customer inside. "We truly have everything, just like the name says. Let me show you around." Ethan was left standing alone in the doorway. He looked down at himself and muttered, "Do I really look that broke?" His avatar displayed his equipped gear exactly as it was. A mismatched patchwork of bronze, silver, and a few scattered glints of gold. To an untrained eye, it might have looked chaotic or unimpressive. To a trained one, it was obvious mid-tier gear with limited resale value. The greeter had taken one look and made her judgment. Ethan's expression darkened. What the hell is mad engineer thinking? Hiring staff with attitudes like this? Judging customers by appearance was retail 101 for how to fail. If this was the standard on the front line, then management clearly needed a serious correction. Possibly even a purge. Chapter 854. A Sting in the Dark. Ethan steadied his expression and took a slow breath, preparing himself as he stepped toward the tailor shop. He wanted to see for himself just how deep this judge-a-book-by-its-cover mentality ran. Ding. Incoming video call from friend. No paper on the big one. Huh. Ethan paused mid-step when he saw the caller ID and accepted the call. Phew. Boss, you're at the tailor shop, just like I thought. No paper on the big one, said the moment the connection stabilized. His grin widening as he recognized the background behind Ethan. What do you mean? Ethan frowned, then quickly remembered. As the owner, stepping into one of his own shops would trigger a system alert for the head of operations. Don't worry about that shop, boss. I'm running a sting, the engineer said, clearly pleased with himself. Ethan paused, the pieces clicking together. So he already knew something was wrong. A sting. Yeah, those Reynolds Trading Company snakes are trying to pull a fast one on us. I'm playing dumb, letting them think they've got moles planted inside. Once they get comfortable, I'll reel in the whole network in one sweep. I just don't know how many of our people they've bought off yet. He chuckled, the sound thick with unfiltered scheming. The look on his face told Ethan everything. If the guy were in trouble, he'd be panicking and begging for backup. Instead, he looked like someone sitting on a mountain of intel. He's grown, Ethan thought, surprised despite himself. All right, he said with a faint smile and a nod. It's in your hands. During the call, Ethan had already stepped back outside the all-you-need tailoring shop. When the call ended, his gaze drifted to the row of 4 shops lined up beside his own franchises. Reynolds Trading Company, blacksmithing, alchemy, engineering. Tailoring. The same company that had once tried to swindle his engineering schematics. In his previous life, Reynolds had been the uncontested king of commercial trade. Their methods were textbook corporate villainy. Crush smaller players, suffocate competition, and grease palms behind closed doors until resistance disappeared. In this life, Ethan's all-you-need empire, fueled by foreknowledge and ruthless efficiency, had caught up to them and even edged ahead in some areas. Only slightly, though. He had to admit it. The financial backing propping up Reynolds was monstrous. Still, if no paper on the big one had a plan, Ethan was content to let him execute it. He'd built the shops to generate wealth. Now that money was no longer a concern, it was time to let the kid manage things, to make mistakes, to grow. He couldn't hold their hands forever. A strange, heavy feeling welled up in his chest. Lately, it had been happening more often, a quiet sense that one day he might simply leave them behind. Whenever the thought surfaced, it felt like trying to breathe underwater. Ding. Incoming video call from friend. Skyblade. The call came almost immediately after he'd hung up with the engineer. Ethan answered without hesitation. Ethan, I found something big, Leo said, his excitement practically vibrating through the screen. A massive score. Let's go clean it out. Where? Ethan asked as Leo's eager face filled his vision. No idea, Leo admitted cheerfully. It's a hidden quest. Can be done solo or as a duo. The rewards double if you clear it together, so it's gotta be good. I triggered it while finishing my Ascension quest on the Lost Isle. Ethan frowned slightly. He was about to ask for the quest name, but the mention of the Lost Isle made him pause. That place was tied to the Brewmaster questline, the monk starting zone, completely isolated from the standard racial regions. The entire class hadn't existed in his past life, leaving him with no frame of reference at all. All right, he said after a moment. Where do we meet? As Leo talked, Ethan considered the wider situation. For days had passed since the initial Fortress War frenzy, and by now, guild leaders across the world were likely deep into negotiations and alliance building. After the chaos in Magnolia Valley, they'd probably attempt a coordinated push, rallying behind a single major guild to seize 4 advanced fortresses in one region and test the energy seal unlock theory. He wasn't worried. One of the 4 advanced fortresses under his control sat on the border between the Springhaven and Harmony City regions. If Zachary Steele wanted to unlock Springhaven's system, he'd have to take that fortress from Ethan personally. If he abandoned Springhaven and aimed for Blackridge instead, the northernmost fortress there was still controlled by the Nocturne Order. And attacking a player-held fortress was an entirely different beast compared to seizing one owned by the system. On top of that, the Nocturne Order had Ethan's quiet, behind-the-scenes support. Even without it, their strength had grown dramatically after absorbing the smaller guilds the Steel Consortium had discarded. Perfect, Leo said, snapping Ethan back to the present. Where are you? I'll come to you. The quest gave me a duo teleport stone. Ethan sent over his coordinates. A moment later, Leo poured it in. After a quick resupply, Leo activated the unfamiliar stone. Light flared. Then everything went black. Ethan waited, assuming the teleportation sequence hadn't fully finished yet. 3 seconds passed. Then 4. His suspicion spiked when he noticed his skill icons were still active. During teleportation, they were always grayed out. He reacted instantly, shifting into panther form. The world sharpened as his vision adapted, revealing a monochrome landscape drowned in shadows. Leo stood beside him, head turning frantically as he waved a hand in front of his own face. Damn it, Ethan snapped. I thought you said the Lost Isle. Did you drop us into Carnage faction territory? Stop flailing around and check your bags. Put on any gear with dark vision now. He sidestepped just in time as Leo's blind, groping hand nearly smacked into his backside. Way too close for comfort. I never said we were still on the Lost Isle, Leo shot back, already fumbling through his inventory. I don't know why we're here either, but the quest just updated. As Leo equipped the suggested gear, his pitch-black world gradually shifted into murky gray. Ethan let out a small breath of relief. During his last raid into Carnage territory, he'd hauled back a stash of dark vision equipment, making sure everyone in their core group grabbed at least one piece. Anyone else from the Survivor faction landing here would have been completely blind. Dark vision was standard fare on the Carnage side and absurdly rare among survivors. Even bind-on equipped drops from this region were scarce, which was why not everyone in Ethan's network had a full set yet. So, Ethan said, scanning the oppressive terrain. Where to now? This way, Leo replied, pointing toward a distant valley that looked like it swallowed light. He broke into a jog and Ethan followed. They hadn't gone far before the terrain tightened around them and the shadows grew heavier. Ethan slowed, then stopped entirely. He stared ahead, his expression hardening. This, he said quietly, is your quest. Chapter 855. the Valley of Morning Winds. Upon arriving, Ethan took in the sight before them, his gaze sweeping across the wide, unervingly flat valley floor. Mounds of earth rose everywhere, irregular and countless, interspersed with weathered, leaning headstones that jutted from the ground like broken teeth. "This is your quest?" he asked flatly. "Yep," Leo replied, practically buzzing with excitement. "And the rewards have to be insane. It's a dark gold tier hidden quest." It was his first time encountering something of that rarity, and it showed. Ethan rolled his eyes, unease prickling along his spine. "Then why do I get such a chilling vibe from this place? It looks like a mass grave." Even in panther form, with its heightened vision, the valley was smothered in a thin, clinging mist that dulled distance and swallowed detail. They stood at the mouth of a gorge, flanked on both sides by low yet steep cliffs. A classic narrow pass that felt designed to funnel anything entering straight inside. Beyond it, the earth was black and barren, devoid of even a blade of grass, dotted with countless indistinct humps fading into the fog. The nearest mound told the story clearly enough. Its coffin lay exposed, with splintered and rotting, as if something had torn its way out long ago. "Not just like a mass grave," Leo said, nodding seriously for once. "It is one." Ethan's expression darkened. "Don't tell me this quest is about robbing graves." "Hey, that's a terrible way to put it," Leo protested. "This is archaeology, studying ancient cultures, exploring historical sites." As he spoke, he rummaged through his pack and produced a full set of excavation tools. Pickaxes, shovels, trowels, chisels, every piece duplicated. He handed one complete set to Ethan. "The NPC lady said there are treasures everywhere down here. Anything we find is ours, as long as we can get to it." Ethan accepted the tools with visible reluctance and fixed Leo with a long, flat stare. "I thought you said you didn't know the quest details. You seem remarkably prepared." Leo scratched the back of his head, suddenly sheepish. "Well, I asked Victor and the others first. They all thought I was crazy and said no. So I figured I'd need a partner. It's kind of creepy down here, right? So everyone else refused and he dragged me into this instead." Ethan thought, exasperation washing over him. Still, he said nothing. The moment he took the tools, Leo's grin returned in full force. "All right, let's get started. There's a timer on the quest. The faster we finish, the better the reward." When Ethan remained silent, Leo cleared his throat nervously, clearly worried he'd overdone it. He turned away and swung his pickaxe into the nearest mound. The excavation was quick. Once the dirt was cleared, Leo pried open the fragile coffin with a crowbar, pulled on gloves, and rummaged through the remains. Moments later, he straightened up, disappointment written plainly across his face. Nothing. Ethan wasn't truly angry, just deeply uncomfortable. Even knowing it was a game, digging up graves felt wrong on a fundamental level. What kind of person made a habit of this? "What exactly are we looking for?" he asked, walking over. "A dull, yellowish orb." "No proper name," Leo replied, already trudging toward the next mound. "I'll share the quest info with you." A translucent window appeared in Ethan's vision. Hidden quest, dark gold tier. Find the lost orb of the brewmaster. Objective: within the Valley of Morning Winds, locate the dull yellowish orb. Lore: ages ago, an apprentice stole what he believed to be a sacred treasure. The orb his master used to suppress volatile energies while brewing celestial alesh. The apprentice believed it to be the source of his master's legendary recipes. In truth, it was nothing more than a common wind-calming orb. Upon the apprentice's death, his own disciples buried him in this forsaken valley, interring the useless orb with him. Though mundane, the orb has been passed down through generations of brewmasters as a symbol of ancestral legacy. Its loss has been mourned for centuries. Clues to its resting place were erased when the Lost Isle was torn from the mainland during the Great Collision. The task now falls to you. Reward: unknown, quality scales inversely with completion time. Time limit: none. Time elapsed: 7 minutes, 38 seconds. By the time Ethan finished reading, Leo had already cracked open another coffin and was elbow-deep inside, searching with growing desperation. About 3 minutes per grave, Ethan calculated grimly. His gaze drifted across the valley, where shadowy mounds stretched endlessly into the mist. How many would that be? Hundreds? Thousands? If their luck was terrible and the orb lay in the last one, and if the timer dragged the reward down to a handful of gold coins, the result would be nothing short of soul-crushing. His instincts screamed that quests with scaling rewards were never this simple. "Leo, keep digging," Ethan said at last. "I'm going to scout ahead." Already frustrated and sweating over his third empty grave, Leo merely grunted in response, silently praying the next one would finally be it. By the time he looked up again, Ethan had already shifted forms. The panther vanished, replaced by a great eagle whose silhouette quickly shrank as it rose into the mist-choked sky. A cold, mournful wind slipped through the canyon, whistling low and hollow. Leo shivered despite himself. "TCH. Stupid game atmosphere," he muttered. "I've slept next to body dumps before. You think this scares me?" Trying to convince himself, he forced his attention back to the grim work. Far above, Ethan flew deeper into the valley, and his expression soon turned grim. 1 kilometer. 2. 3. He pushed on until he'd covered 5 kilometers, yet nothing below him changed. Grave mounds, headstones, shattered coffins. A strip at least 50 meters wide and stretching beyond 5 kilometers. Nothing but graves. They could dig for a year and never clear it. Leo had probably assumed it was a small burial ground, something manageable with enough time and stubbornness. "Leo," Ethan said over their private channel, exhaustion edging his voice. "Stop digging." "What? Why?" "Because this quest is a trap. Even if we brought the entire Renegade Alliance, we'd be digging forever. I've flown 5 clicks and it still hasn't ended. This isn't about excavation." He paused, scanning the valley below. "Pack up and head toward me. I'm going further in. And be careful. A place this big with 0 mobs is not normal." Without waiting for a reply, Ethan beat his wings and accelerated, his passage carving a spiraling tunnel through the mist as he flew straight down the valley's center. It didn't take long for his sharp eyes to catch movement. His instincts kicked in instantly, pulling him higher and abandoning low-altitude flight. Below him, the barren ground was no longer still. Figures were moving, and there were a lot of them. Chapter 856. The Tomb That Drew Them All. The figures below formed an overwhelming tide of Carnage faction players, spread across the valley like ants swarming a carcass. That alone explained why the surrounding area was eerily empty of monsters. Everything along their path had already been systematically wiped out. From his vantage point in the air, Ethan watched as the ground farther ahead began to convulse. Graves burst open one after another, coffins shattering as undead figures clawed their way out. Every single one was a level 60 elite. That finally explained the broken coffins they had noticed earlier, though it was clear not every grave was spawning a creature. The players were advancing, but at a painfully slow pace. It was obvious they had spent a long time pushing this far into the valley. That meant the monsters here were not on a respawn cycle. Once cleared, they stayed gone. Another detail caught Ethan's attention. Despite their sheer numbers, easily tens of thousands, this was not a unified force. Guild banners were scattered and inconsistent, and many players fought alone or in loose, improvised groups. There was little coordination, no central command. Yet all of them were moving in the same direction, pressing deeper into the valley. Why push inward like this unless something was waiting at the end? The thought settled heavily in his mind. Ethan immediately opened his interface and sent Leo a message. "Leo, listen up. About 10 clicks ahead, there's a massive Carnage faction push. At least 10,000 players, moving toward the valley's center. Stay where you are. I'm heading back for you. We're flying over them. Whatever's at the end looks important, and it might be tied to your quest." Minutes later, Ethan was airborne again, Leo clinging to his back in eagle form as they soared above the grinding Carnage players below. None of them noticed the shadow passing overhead as the two cut straight toward the heart of the valley. Another 10 kilometers brought the terrain to an abrupt end. The valley terminated in a sheer cliff face that rose like a wall, cutting off any further path forward. Ethan slowed and descended. Set into the rock face was a massive opening, freshly blasted open. The ground below was littered with shattered stone. Boulders cracked apart and scattered outward. He landed and crouched near the debris, brushing his hand over a fractured rock. "This was blown open," he said quietly. "Someone's already inside." The sharp, acrid scent of black powder still clung to the stone. Ethan was not a rogue, but he had enough experience to know the explosion was recent. Hearing this, Leo's expression darkened. From the air, the structure of the cliff had already stood out to him. This was not a natural cave. It was a tomb, large and deliberate in its construction. And that meant there was no doubt about it. This was the resting place mentioned in his quest, the burial site of the brewmaster's apprentice. A surge of frustration hit him all at once. He had been wandering around like a fool, digging up random graves scattered across the valley. If Ethan had not been able to scout from above, Leo might have wasted weeks chasing false leads, only to discover the real target had been taken by someone else. He resisted the urge to smack himself. "Let's go," Leo said, urgency bleeding into his voice. He pointed upward at the cliff face. Dozens of ropes still hung down from above, swaying slightly. Clear proof that many people had already entered. Ethan nodded, and together they stepped into the gaping entrance. The moment they crossed the threshold, A bone-deep chill seeped into them, unnatural and immediate, as though the air itself rejected their presence. Bodies, Ethan said softly. Just a dozen meters in, 3 corpses lay sprawled across the stone floor. Their owners had already released their spirits and respawned, but ethereal only cleared physical remains during the daily server reset. Judging by the state of the bodies, they had died less than an hour ago. Ethan crouched to examine them. Their equipment was solid, nothing flashy but clearly high level, likely players in the 45 to 50 range. Yet they were dead. Did someone kill them after they got inside? Leo asked, frowning. Or were they the first ones in? He knelt closer, studying the wounds, and his eyes widened slightly. Wait, Leo said slowly. These injuries. They're wrong. Ethan looked up. Wrong how? Angles, Leo replied, pointing. Side strikes. Back strikes. This wasn't a fair fight. They were hit from behind. Ethan straightened. You're saying they turned on each other? Not each other, Leo said, shaking his head. Their own people. Someone followed them in and ambushed them. That explanation clicked immediately. The ones outside probably got tipped off, Ethan said. These 3 find the tomb, die, respawn, and spread the word. Reinforcements rush in, and the first group gets wiped to clear the path. He glanced deeper into the darkness ahead. We need to move. Fast. There's no telling how many more are coming. They pressed forward, moving several hundred meters into the tomb. The darkness inside was far thicker than the gloomy fog outside, swallowing light rather than reflecting it. Without Leo's dark vision gear, they would have been blind beyond a few steps. Even now, their visibility extended no more than 20 meters before dissolving into pitch-black nothingness. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a junction that split into 3 separate paths. This one, Ethan said immediately, turning left without hesitation. Leo hurried after him. You didn't even think about it. How do you know? Ethan slowed just enough to gesture downward. Footprints. The other 2 paths have tracks going in and out. This one only has prints going in. Nobody's come back. Leo stopped and looked more closely. He sucked in a breath. Ethan was right. The conclusion was obvious. Whatever lay ahead, no one who entered this passage had returned. Damn, Leo muttered. Good catch. You're rattled, Ethan said calmly. Otherwise you would have noticed. You didn't survive the military by missing things like this. Leo scratched the back of his head and gave a crooked smile, not bothering to argue. They continued another 200 meters. The darkness grew heavier, almost thick enough to feel, as though the stone itself was devouring the light. Ethan ran his hand along the wall, fingers brushing over something strange. Pigment, he said. Light absorbent. He frowned, eyes narrowing. This isn't some nobody's grave. Whoever this apprentice was, he wasn't insignificant. If this is truly his tomb, then he died with power. Maybe even as a lord. The atmosphere pressed down harder with every step. Leo had drawn his black iron staff, gripping it tightly, knuckles pale. His breathing was shallow, his shoulders tense. You all right? Ethan asked, noticing the sweat forming on Leo's brow despite the cold. I don't know, Leo admitted. Something feels wrong. Claustrophobia? Ethan asked, watching him carefully. No way, Leo said quickly. I couldn't have served if I had that. It's not the space. Something else. Feels heavy. Dread. Ethan prompted. Shortness of breath? Leo hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. That's still how claustrophobia can start, Ethan said, stepping closer and placing a steadying hand against Leo's chest. Slow down. Breathe. Control your heart rate. I used to deal with it too. Leo shook his head firmly, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. No, this isn't in my head. I feel it now. It's coming from deeper inside. Presence. Like something powerful is pressing down on me. His gaze strained forward, piercing only a few meters into the black. Ethan stopped moving. He felt nothing at all. Chapter 857. Suppression beneath the crystal veil. Leo was certain there was a suppressing presence deeper inside the tomb. Ethan, on the other hand, felt absolutely nothing. That alone unsettled him. He had always trusted his instincts, especially his sixth sense, the intangible awareness that had saved him countless times. It had never failed him before. The idea that it might be wrong now sat badly in his gut. Still, Leo's reaction forced him to pay closer attention. When he focused, he realized something was off. His soul senses were not gone, but they were muted, dulled in the same way light itself was swallowed by the walls. Whatever coated this place did not merely absorb illumination. It dampened perception. His vision, sharper than Leo's thanks to his race and stats, stretched roughly 30 meters ahead. But his intuitive awareness, The invisible radius he usually felt rather than saw had collapsed to match that distance exactly. When they first entered the tomb, he had been able to feel things nearly 70 meters out. Now it was barely half that, and shrinking with every step forward. That was not normal. He had originally planned to stay in stealth, slipping past enemies and scouting ahead. But one look at Leo told him that plan was no longer viable. Leo was sweating despite the cold, his steps uneven, his face pale in a way that had nothing to do with fear alone. Whatever was affecting him was getting worse. Just as Ethan's perception compressed down to a mere 10 meters, they rounded a bend in the tunnel. Swish, swish. 2 streaks of white light tore through the darkness straight toward them. Leo jerked violently, panic cutting through his haze, and barely managed a clumsy sidestep. A frigid frostbolt grazed the tip of his nose, instantly frosting the sweat on his skin. The shock made him gasp, but it also snapped him partially out of his stupor. He staggered back, fumbling to bring his staff up. Ethan was already in motion. Panther form took over in an instant, his body dissolving into a blur of shadow and muscle. One clean swipe of his claws opened the throat of a berserker who had been lurking just around the corner, waiting for the ambush to land. This was not the arena, where stats were normalized and gear equalized. Ethan was level 63. The raw level difference alone was overwhelming, and even though his equipment was low tier, every piece was enchanted to plus 30. The numbers spoke for themselves. The berserker collapsed, hands clutched to his neck, eyes wide with disbelief as his health vanished. The frost mage who had targeted Leo froze mid-cast, terror flashing across his face. His front line had disappeared in less than a second. He canceled his spell, magic flaring wildly around his feet. Blink? Not happening, Ethan said coldly. As the mage's form twisted and vanished in a burst of spatial distortion, Ethan activated Wild Charge. The mage reappeared farther down the tunnel, but Ethan was already airborne. His body dragged along an invisible tether created by the skill. His trajectory curved like a predator pouncing through darkness, timing precise to a fraction of a second. Too early and the mage would not have moved. Too late and the distance would have broken the charge. Shit! Leo cursed, adrenaline finally kicking in. He activated Energy Burst and shot forward, terrified Ethan would run headlong into more enemies with their visibility so limited. By the time Leo skidded to a stop, heart pounding, the Starford Panther was already walking back toward him, claws retracting as he shifted back to human form. "That'll wake you up?" Leo said, forcing a breathless laugh. "Sentries left behind by the main group?" "Most likely," Ethan replied, "which means there are more ahead. And now they know we're here." If he had been alone, he would have vanished back into stealth and turned this into a slaughter from the shadows. But Leo could not hide, and in his current condition he was a liability. "Boss," Leo said suddenly, eyes wide. "I figured it out." "Figured what out?" "Why I feel like garbage. I've got a debuff." Ethan's expression sharpened. "What does it say?" Leo swallowed and pulled up the interface again. Suppression of the Grave King's bloodline. All attributes reduced by 50%. Ethan stared at him. Grave King's bloodline suppression? Why would that affect you? The answer hit both of them at the same time. Their eyes met. "Because in the real world, you..." Ethan began slowly. "Yeah," Leo said quietly. "That's got to be it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Ethan," Leo said at last, his voice low and uneasy. "What the hell is ethereal? How can it even know something like that?" "Forget the how," Ethan said firmly. "Focus on what it means. This place might be more than just dangerous for you. Could be an opportunity." Leo huffed a weak laugh. "Good thing I tricked you into coming. Then, I'd be dead weight on my own." "Yeah," Ethan said dryly. "You'd still be out there playing gravedigger." He gestured forward and they moved on. They advanced more carefully this time, every step measured. Then, with a single stride, the world changed. The tunnel abruptly opened into a massive cavern flooded with light. After so long in absolute darkness, the transition was brutal. Their vision flared white, their eyes screaming in protest as they stumbled forward, blind and disoriented. "Move!" Ethan did not think. He reacted. He slammed his foot into Leo's side, sending him sprawling out of the tunnel's mouth. Boom! 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 The ground they had been standing on detonated as multiple mines exploded in rapid succession, the blast washing past them in a concussive wave. Stone and crystal shattered outward, the trap triggered by those who had passed through before them. Ears ringing, they scrambled to their feet as their vision slowly returned. The cavern itself was not actually that bright. It mirrored the earlier junction, splitting into 3 separate passages. The difference lay in the material. The walls, floor, and ceiling were made of crystalline, glass-like stone that refracted and scattered light in sharp, unnatural angles. The transition had felt so violent because the tunnel they exited appeared to be sealed by some kind of barrier, creating a hard line between total darkness and sudden illumination, with no gradual adjustment. Whoever had come through first had clearly suffered the same momentary blindness and decided to leave a lethal greeting behind. "Thorough bastards," Leo muttered, downing a health potion. Even with Ethan's kick, shards of shrapnel had torn into him. A direct hit from that cluster would have erased his 40,000 health pool instantly. "Save the potions," Ethan said, already shifting into tree form. He cast rejuvenation on Leo and layered several healing overtime spells on himself as well. He had taken damage too. Shifting to bear first would have reduced it, but protecting Leo had come first. Once the healing settled, Leo stared at the three identical, glittering tunnels ahead. Now what? Another choice. Leo crouched and inspected the floor, but the smooth crystal surface offered nothing. No dust, no scuff marks, no footprints. Ethan checked as well, then shook his head. "Nothing," he said. "Guess we do this the old-fashioned way," Leo said, shrugging. He reached into his pack and pulled out a thin, oddly shaped object. "By mountains coil and rivers fold, past gate of 8 and story told, where light and dark in balance hold," Leo intoned solemnly, raising the device like a ritual tool. Ethan stared at him. "Is that a dowsing rod?" Leo coughed. Yeah. That exists in ethereal?" Seeing Ethan's expression, Leo scratched the back of his head with his free hand. "I had a blacksmith make it." "What does it do?" "Well, mostly nothing. And the chant." "For atmosphere," Leo said quickly. "You know, to scare ghosts." He paused. "Hey, wait." The rod in his hand twitched, then slowly settled, pointing decisively toward the left-hand tunnel. Leo grinned. "Looks like it does something after all." Chapter 858. The coffin beneath the crystal dome. Following Leo down the chosen tunnel, Ethan felt a deep, lingering sense of absurdity settle over him. He was putting his faith in a superstitious trinket inside a video game, and not even a particularly reputable one at that. Still, they had no better leads. At worst, it would turn out to be a dead end and they would retrace their steps, bruised pride included. This passage was immediately different from the others. It was brighter, almost painfully so. Yet the oppressive force that had followed them through the tomb did not lessen. Instead, it grew heavier. Ethan's perception, the in-game reflection of his real-world soul sense, shrank violently, compressed into a suffocating bubble barely a meter around his body. This place did not merely suppress perception. It throttled it, as if intent on crushing any awareness that dared intrude. The increased visibility only made things worse. The walls, floor, and ceiling were formed from a chaotic mosaic of diamond-like crystals, every surface fractured into countless sharp facets. Light bounced wildly in all directions, turning the passage into a shattered, endless mirror. With each step, dozens of distorted reflections of Ethan and Leo slid and warped along the crystal surfaces, multiplying their movements and bending them at impossible angles. The effect was nauseating, a visual assault that gnawed at the mind as much as the senses. After what felt like several kilometers of walking through that disorienting hell, Leo suddenly broke the silence. "We're on the right path." "Huh. The pressure," Leo said, pointing straight ahead. "It's focused. No deviation at all." Ethan nodded slowly. Now that Leo had said it, he could feel it too. A faint but unmistakable aura seeped through the crystal-lined passage ahead of them, ancient and desolate, like something that had been sealed away for far too long. They pressed on, the aura growing heavier with every step, until they crossed an invisible threshold. No traps detonated. No mechanisms roared to life. As their eyes adjusted, the space before them opened into a vast circular dome, its scale dwarfing anything they had seen so far. "It's the tomb chamber," Leo exclaimed, unable to keep the excitement out of his voice. "How do you know?" Ethan asked quietly, already scanning the area. "Circular dome above, square chamber below," Leo said, wiping sweat from his brow but grinning proudly. "Heaven is round, earth is square. Classic funerary symbolism. And look at the coffin in the center. This is definitely the main tomb." "Let me guess," Ethan said flatly. "You read that in some pulp novel." Leo froze for half a second. "Hey, how did you know?" Ethan rubbed his face with one hand. Of course, in their previous life, Leo had been hopelessly obsessed with tomb-raiding adventure stories. Ignoring Ethan's reaction, Leo swept his gaze across the chamber. Directly ahead, more than 200 players stood in a dense formation, clearly organized and on alert, all eyes fixed on the two of them. Around the outer perimeter, another 100 or so players were scattered in loose groups, overturning decorative fixtures and prying apart anything that looked remotely valuable. Broken ornamental artifacts littered the floor, stripped of whatever minor worth they once held. Ethan, Leo whispered urgently. Are these people idiots? The real treasure has to be in the coffin. They're wasting time on trash. Ethan did not answer. His attention had locked onto the main group, not the mass of elites as a whole, but one familiar face standing among them. The man noticed Ethan at the same time and recognized him instantly. His expression did not change, but his eyes flicked in a subtle, deliberate pattern. A clear warning. Not here. Do not acknowledge me. Longer than Luffy. A woman's voice cut in sharply. You know him? She had caught the silent exchange. Don't know him, the man replied without hesitation. Longer than Luffy, better known outside the game as Emery Shaw, kept his tone perfectly flat. The woman frowned and shifted her sharp gaze to Ethan and Leo. You're the druid god, she said. How did you make it into Carnage territory? Ethan ignored the question. I assume you pulled the rest of your ambush team back from the tunnel, he replied instead. Her frown deepened. I have no interest in making an enemy of you. Ethan smiled, though there was nothing friendly about it. Then you must be looking to cooperate, which means you're stuck. A flicker of irritation flashed through her eyes. Ethan was deliberately steering the conversation, denying her any sense of control. Across from her, Emery Shaw almost smiled, barely restraining it before smoothing his expression back into neutrality. He knew their guild leader well and her iron-handed leadership style. Watching her struggle like this was new and quietly satisfying. Several other players nearby also seemed entertained, though none of them spoke. Ethan swept his gaze over the group. Strangely, there was no overt hostility in the air. Then Emery muttered something under his breath. A tall man with a sharp, hawk-like nose suddenly stepped forward from the ranks. The so-called druid god? He scoffed. How rude, speaking to a lady in such a tone. I challenge you to a duel. Shooting. His rapier flashed free of its sheath. Fine by me, Ethan said. The word had barely left his lips before his body vanished. He reappeared at the exact moment the man was struck. The man had been in the middle of an exaggerated flourish, blade twirling as if on a stage, his challenge still echoing in the air. He caught sight of Ethan's form materializing and panicked, triggering his own stealth a fraction of a second too late. That fraction was enough. Before the man could fully fade from view, Ethan's claws were already tearing into him. A rake from stealth slammed him into a stun. 5 seconds were granted by the system. Ethan needed one. A single shred finished it. The man collapsed, his body dissolving into light. Clang. The rapier hit the stone floor with a clean, ringing sound. Ooh, it dropped, Ethan said as he shifted back into human form and picked up the gleaming weapon. This would be wasted on you. I'll hang on to it and find it a proper owner. He slipped it into his bag without ceremony, doing so right in front of the stunned crowd. Ha! Savage as ever, Ethan. Emery Shaw finally broke formation, laughing as he strode over and clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Thought you didn't know me, Ethan said, returning the punch lightly. Had to keep up appearances, Emery replied, lowering his voice. But seriously, how did you know we were staging that? I didn't at first, Ethan said. But after my first comment, that guy got real heated. Nobody else reacted at all. Made it obvious he was acting on his own. His eyes flicked briefly toward the woman, probably trying to impress the boss. Ethan turned his attention back to her. She stepped forward, her expression composed, a cool smile settling into place. Harbor City, Q Squad Liaison. Lily Silverwood. The name gave Ethan pause. Silverwood. He frowned slightly. That Silverwood family? Ethan knew the Silverwoods well. Lila is my younger sister, Lily said. It was not an explanation so much as a statement of fact. Lila rarely spoke about her relatives in detail, and she had been especially careful to keep her family separate from her in-game identity, choosing the name Moonbeam precisely to avoid any connections. That was why hearing the name Silverwood now caught him off guard. It was not the family itself that surprised him, but the sudden realization that there was someone this close, whom Lila had never once mentioned. Ethan cleared his throat, suddenly feeling the situation shift in a way he had not anticipated at all. Well, this is my sister-in-law. Chapter 859. The Coffin That Answered Back. Trying to smooth over the awkwardness, Ethan shifted his attention past Lily Silverwood to the people gathered behind her. Are these all 9th Division folks? Yes, everyone from the division is here. Well, except those on the survivor side, Lily replied without hesitation. The simple question sent a quiet ripple through the group. A few of them exchanged looks, others stiffened slightly. They clearly had not expected him to identify their affiliation so easily. It was not hard, really. Ethan knew Emery Shaw's background well enough. Emery was a drifter by nature, a lone operator who only moved with others when it truly mattered. Much like Victor had been back in Blackridge before everything went to hell. For someone like that to stick with a group, the bonds had to be solid and long-standing. Then there was their equipment. Their armor and weapons looked off in subtle ways, not standard issue and not quite fitting any textbook class templates either. They were not all hidden classes, but they were close enough to raise questions. From what Ethan understood about ethereal, energy users and mutants who logged in had a much higher chance of awakening variant or unique professions, and seeing this many gathered together practically screamed organization. There was only one department that fit. Lily's straightforward introduction had simply confirmed it. The only thing that did not quite add up was the presence of the earlier challenger. And the earlier confrontation now made more sense in hindsight. It had felt staged, almost like they wanted Ethan to deal with him personally. No wonder Emery had played dumb at first. The whole act had been sloppy, though. When Ethan arrived, there had been no killing intent directed at him at all. They had known exactly who he was, both in-game and in the real world. As for that guy himself, he had walked straight into the trap without a hint of caution. So what was the deal with that guy? Ethan asked, genuinely curious. An agent of the Angelic Church, Lily said. The details are classified. Someone will probably reach out to you later. For now, all you need to know is that after the recent restructuring of the 9th Division, the Church has been getting bold. Ethan gave her a sideways look. Let me guess. You cannot tell me because I am still just a grunt in M Squad. Not enough clearance yet. Lily and Emery shared another glance. Emery scratched the back of his neck and laughed awkwardly. Boss? How about we focus on why we are actually here? That idiot led us straight to this tomb. The moment we got inside, he killed the 2 scouts who brought the original intel. Sneaky bastard. He was supposed to bring his own guild. But then he saw Lily here and decided to show off instead. As he spoke, he subtly guided Ethan toward the massive coffin at the center of the chamber. Lily shot him a sharp look but continued the explanation. The scouts he killed were Carnage-side exclusive classes. Nothing special combat-wise, but they belonged to a massive exploration network. They noticed blood-red auroras appearing over this valley more and more frequently, and the undead activity outside has been increasing every day. Something changed here. We got the intel, avoided the valley floor entirely, and rappelled down from the cliffs. How did you cross the faction border? Ethan nodded as the rest fell into place. Quest-related, he said simply, then gave a brief explanation of Leo's task and how they had ended up here. Find anything worthwhile before we showed up? He asked. Nothing but junk, Emery replied, sounding faintly disappointed. If your friend has a quest here, the item is probably inside that coffin. That earned a few muted sighs from the 9th Division members. Ethereal was full of locations like this, places where only the quest holder could claim the real reward. Still, no one complained much. Running into Ethan alone made the trip worthwhile. So how do we open it? Lily asked, studying the coffin. We have checked every inch. No switches, no seams, no visible mechanism. I can open it. Leo spoke up from behind them, his voice tight. Emery turned immediately. Then what are we waiting for? Leo hesitated. I can open it, but there is something inside. Something big. My debuff is already at 89% suppression. If I trigger the coffin, it might push past 90. Could even hit 100. That finally explained his pale face and labored breathing. A few people glanced at him with new understanding. Ethereal was notorious for bizarre mechanics, so they had assumed it was just another odd build interaction. All right, Emery said sharply. Form up. Skyblade says there is a live one in the box. Get ready to turn it into loot. The response was immediate. Nearly 200 elite players moved as one. Shield tanks forming the front line, while damage dealers and healers slid into position behind them with practiced ease. Leo looked to Ethan. Ethan met his gaze and gave a firm nod. Taking a steadying breath, Leo stepped up to the massive stone coffin. He pressed the end of his black iron staff into a keyhole-like indentation carved into the side of the lid. Clunk, clack, clack. Ancient mechanisms stirred within the stone, heavy and deliberate, as if something that had not moved in centuries was waking up. Leo pushed, and the staff slid inward until nearly a third of its length disappeared. Then, without warning, the staff was violently pulled from his hands. It shot deeper into the coffin until it stuck out evenly from both sides, forming an awkward crossbar before coming to an abrupt stop. They waited. Nothing happened. The coffin remained sealed, silent and unmoving. Try twisting it, Ethan said, stepping closer. He grabbed one end of the staff while Leo took the other. They strained together, but it did not move an inch. It felt less like stone and more like it had been welded to the mountain itself. I cannot even pull it out now, Leo said, panic creeping into his voice. Ethan frowned and began circling the coffin, eyes scanning every carved line and groove. The sound had been right. The mechanism had engaged. Something was missing. On his third pass, he stopped. Leo, your wine cask. Look at this. He pointed to a shallow depression etched into the coffin's surface, its intricate pattern worn but unmistakable. It looked eerily similar to the design carved into the base of Leo's prized brewmaster cask. Chapter 860. The False Brewmaster Awakens. Leo staggered forward and equipped his wine cask, which materialized strapped across his back with a dull thud. In his current state, even standing upright was a struggle, let alone bearing its weight. His knees buckled slightly, and he would have collapsed if Ethan had not stepped in, bracing him from the side and helping him lift the cask into position. Together, they slid it carefully into the carved depression at the front of the stone coffin. Clunk, clack, clunk. Ancient mechanisms groaned as they awakened after ages of dormancy. The iron staff embedded in the coffin lid shuddered, then began spinning rapidly, its motion growing faster with each passing second. With a deep, grinding roar that vibrated through the chamber floor, the massive stone lid slid downward like a vertical gate retracting into the earth. Roar! A thunderous bellow burst from the widening gap, followed by a thick crimson mist that surged outward like a living thing. Ugh! Leo swayed violently, his vision blurring as his legs nearly gave out beneath him. What is it? Ethan snapped, gripping Leo's arm and hauling him upright before he could collapse. All my attributes. Reduced by 99%. Leo forced out, his face drained of all color. Ethan sucked in a sharp breath. Damn. You would have been dead already if you came alone. Emery, get someone over here. Pull him back now. At his shout, two nearby players rushed over, each taking one of Leo's arms and quickly escorting him toward the rear of the formation, where healers and support players clustered. The bloody mist continued to spread across the chamber, but Ethan felt no debuff effects trigger. Whatever it was, it did not corrode or poison. The smell alone, however, was overwhelming, thick with iron and decay, turning the air nauseatingly heavy. A voice rolled out from the half-open coffin, distorted and grating, like rusted blades scraping against stone. Roar! The true successor of the brewmaster. You have finally come. The savage staff, the cosmos cask, ha ha ha, and my orb of spirits. The three sacred artifacts are reunited at last. I shall recreate the celestial brew. This world will remember only me. I, the one true brewmaster, shall be eternal. Boom! The coffin exploded. Stone shards and slabs detonated outward in all directions, slamming into the surrounding players like a storm of siege ammunition. The frontline shield tanks reacted instantly, slamming their shields into the ground and raising their shield walls just in time. Even so, the impact was brutal. Several tanks groaned as their arms trembled violently, boots digging furrows into the stone floor as they fought to hold their ground. After a deafening cascade of impacts, the chamber fell into an eerie silence. Dust drifted slowly through the air as the tanks lowered their shields one by one. Ethan had already shifted into bare form the moment the coffin detonated. Thick fur bristled across his massive frame as he repeatedly layered iron hide, each heavy chunk of flying stone feeding his rage and allowing him to stack the damage reduction buff higher and higher. By the time the barrage ended, he had built it up to 12 layers, an absurd number under normal circumstances, yet even then the force drove him backward step by step. When the dust finally settled, he found himself a dozen paces from the dais. Something stood where the coffin had been. It was not tall or imposing in stature. Instead, it was short and hunched, its body shriveled and leathery, with skin stretched tight over bone. A long, prehensile tail curled behind it, twitching slightly. In one clawed hand, it held Leo's black iron staff, the savage staff, cradling it with unmistakable reverence as its sunken eyes drank in every detail. Holy shit! That's a monkey? Don't tell me its surname is Sun? Emery blurted out, voicing what half the raid was thinking as he referenced the legendary Monkey King. It's an ape, yes? Ethan replied calmly from the side, eyes locked on the creature. But not stone-born. Its flesh is dried out, desiccated. The creature ignored them completely. With a casual flick of its wrist, a clasp along the savage staff slid open and latched neatly into a metal hoop on the cosmos cask. In one smooth motion, it slung the staff over its shoulder, the massive cask now hanging behind it like a grotesque backpack. Then it opened its mouth and spat out a milky white sphere. Snap! The orb, unmistakably the orb of spirits, was pressed into a socket at the top of the savage staff, locking into place with a faint pulse of light. Only then did its gaze shift, sweeping past Ethan and landing on Leo's frail figure at the rear of the formation. It muttered. You are also grave-touched. Its eyes widened, and the next moment it threw its head back in raucous laughter. Ha ha ha! To think that the heir to the brewmaster's legacy would be one of the grave-touched, and of such common blood. Come, bow before me as your master. Do this, or every last one of you dies here today. It raised a clawed finger and beckoned lazily. This NPC talks way too much damn shit, Emery shouted. Tanks, lock it down. Kill it. He hurled an explosive trap without hesitation, the device arcing through the air toward the withered ape. At his command, dozens of shield tanks surged forward as one. Bang! The trap detonated against the creature's chest. -32. A small, two-digit damage number floated up. It's taking damage, someone yelled. Hit it! Hit it! A wave of relief rippled through the group. Their raid composition leaned heavily toward physical damage, with limited magic support. If physical attacks failed to hurt it, they would be in serious trouble. Insignificant insects, the creature snarled. As the first wave of tanks closed in, it threw its head back and roared. In one fluid motion, it swung the savage staff, the Cosmos cask still attached, in a wide horizontal arc. Whump! The sound cracked through the chamber like a cannon firing. Before they could even reach striking distance, the frontline tanks were smashed aside by the swinging cask. Shields warped and buckled, bodies lifted clean off the ground and flung through the air like broken dolls. Ethan's pupils shrank. Shield tanks were built like fortresses, boasting absurd strength and defensive stats. For a single, basic swing without a visible skill activation to scatter them so easily was deeply alarming. The first rank was obliterated. The second rank tripped over the fallen, but the raid did not panic. Training and repetition kicked in instantly. The third and fourth ranks vaulted over their downed allies, the fourth bracing their shields tightly against the backs of the third to reinforce the charge. Charge! 20 voices roared in perfect unison. The air filled with the thunderous sound of armored boots pounding stone. Whump! The creature reversed its swing effortlessly, the Cosmos cask whipping back the other way. This time, Ethan caught a brief flash of white light from the orb of spirits embedded in the staff. The instant it pulsed, a violent vortex of compressed air erupted around the cask, acting like a thruster and accelerating the swing far beyond what raw strength alone could achieve. Look out! Ethan shouted. Too late. The charging tanks collided head-on with the turbocharged cask. The impact was catastrophic. A deafening blast of force tore through the formation, and half of the leading tanks in the third rank vanished outright, their health bars blinking out in a flash of white light as they were instantly killed. Ha ha ha! Die! Die! All of you! The creature shrieked, hoisting the staff and cask back onto its shoulder. Then, despite its small frame and the massive weight it carried, it bent its legs and leaped. Not toward the remaining tanks, but high into the air, arcing directly toward the clustered backline where Emery, Lily Silverwood, and the ranged damage dealers were positioned. Scatter! Now! Lily shouted, her figure blurring as she activated Blink and vanished from her original spot. The backline dissolved into chaos as players dove, rolled, and sprinted in every direction. Kegtois! The creature began to shout from the apex of its leap, preparing to hurl the Cosmos cask downward. Ethan recognized the skill name instantly. It was Leo's ability. Toss this, you ugly bastard! Ethan growled, his voice suddenly right behind the creature's ear. Chapter 861. The chase begins. Ha! The creature grunted, twisting its withered head as if it had sensed something wrong. A shadow was already falling across its back. Ethan burst from stealth, his body surging forward as wild charge detonated beneath his feet. As the creature's eyes finally caught the movement behind it, Ethan struck. Rake! The blow landed cleanly before it could even raise its staff. The stealth bonus triggered instantly, locking the creature in place as the stun icon flickered above its head. Normally, the effect would last 5 full seconds. This time, the timer barely crawled past 2. Level difference penalty, Ethan noted without surprise. When Emery had attacked earlier, the boss's information had finally revealed itself. Level 95. It was the highest level enemy Ethan had ever encountered, excluding the Crowleying god that had once hunted him across the wilds. Its health pool was obscene, a staggering 120 million HP. Yet there was no rank indicator beneath its name. No elite, no rare, no world boss. Just a level 95 creature with a health bar that felt fundamentally wrong. Even if it stood perfectly still, could they actually kill it? The answer seemed doubtful. The 30-something damage Emery had dealt earlier had already regenerated away as if it had never happened. Massive HP, paper-thin defense, and regeneration so aggressive it bordered on absurd. Ethan's opening strike told a different story. Over 1,000 damage from the hit itself, followed by a bleeding effect ticking for 600 every half second. For a creature of this level and supposed durability, its defenses were laughably low. Emery, at his level, should not have been able to scratch it at all. Even Ethan should have been hitting for double digits at best. Instead, his numbers were comfortably in the thousands. The trade-off was obvious. The strength was monstrous. Even fully braced shield tanks had been unable to hold it. Without a solid tank wall, no one dared to commit to sustained damage. Still, Ethan's brief stun bought exactly what they needed. Emery's scattered backline finally had time to disengage fully. A single full-powered keg toss into that clump would have been catastrophic, layered with slows and knockdowns that could have wiped them outright. The stun ended the moment the creature hit the stone floor. It shook off the daze with terrifying speed. By then, Ethan was already retreating at full sprint. His damage output had locked the creature's attention onto him completely, his threat far outstripping everyone else's. He could have stayed for another combo, but against 120 million HP, that effort would have been meaningless. Kite him. Hit him when he's chasing me, Ethan shouted, switching plans on the fly. The monkey-like abomination was clearly a melee fighter. The tomb chamber itself worked in their favor, filled with thick pillars and jagged stone formations perfect for line control. As long as Ethan kept dealing damage, the creature would stay on him. In panther form, his movement speed gave him the edge, and if needed, he could always shift into owl form for ranged pressure. The rest of the team could attack from behind whenever he dragged the boss close enough. A war of attrition. Of course, there were unknowns. He hadn't tested its full movement speed yet. He knew Leo's kit well enough, and seeing the creature use keg toss confirmed it was some kind of monk variant. Probably not a full brewmaster, but close enough to be dangerous. Boss, just keep running. Normal monks only have one movement skill, roll 2 charges. Watch out for Drunken Sphere. Don't let him drop it in your path. And he's got a charge that pulls you to him. Leo called out from the back, tank instincts kicking in as he rattled off the essentials. Got it, Ethan replied. In the same breath, he shifted into owl form. At maximum range, he flicked his wrist and unleashed 2 instant cast dots. Sunfire, Moonfire. Both spells latched on immediately. The damage numbers confirmed his suspicion. Its magical defense was even worse than its physical. Each tick of Sunfire burned for over 2,000, while Moonfire followed close behind. When Sunfire crit, the numbers spiked past 3,000, almost certainly boosted by Ethan's heavily stacked stats. It's weak to fire. Like an undead, Leo shouted. Ethan had already figured that out. The creature's gaze snapped toward him the moment it regained full control, its lips peeling back to reveal yellowed fangs. Roar. You die. It activated roll, covering more than 20 meters in a heartbeat. There it is, Ethan thought calmly. The distance was nearly identical to Leo's energy burst, but there was no lingering speed boost afterward. The tomb chamber itself was enormous, a square nearly 300 meters on each side, with a ceiling high enough to swallow echoes. Space was not the problem. As the creature completed its roll and surged forward, Ethan turned and ran. Don't let it get close. A poorly placed Drunken Sphere could cut off his escape path instantly, and that would be the end of him. The chase began. Stone pillars blurred past as Ethan sprinted through the chamber, the sound of heavy footsteps and rattling casks thundering behind him. Emery's group had plenty of ranged damage dealers, but once the chase started, the problem became obvious. They simply couldn't keep up. The creature was fast, far faster than expected. Even in panther form, Ethan was only slightly quicker. That made sustained melee pressure impossible. The close combat fighters had no choice but to wait for Ethan to deliberately loop the boss back toward them. They tried to adapt. Emery coordinated several interception attempts using the remaining tanks, hoping to briefly pin it down. Each attempt failed spectacularly. Whenever a tank came close, the creature lashed out wildly with its staff and cask, sending them flying like broken dolls. Strangely, attacks from behind barely seemed to register. After enough failures, the strategy settled into something grim and exhausting. Ethan ran, lap after lap, pillar to pillar, corner to corner. 2 hours passed. By the time anyone dared to check the health bar again, the withered monkey had only lost 15% of its total HP. Nearly all of that damage had come from Ethan's fire-based dots, relentlessly ticking away. If I could just stand and fight it, Ethan thought as his legs burned. With defenses this bad, he dismissed the idea immediately. One of Emery's level 59 shield tanks, boasting over 50,000 HP, had been reduced to paste by a single direct swing. Ethan, even in bare form, only had around 70,000 HP and better defenses. Whether he could survive even one clean hit was a gamble he wasn't willing to take. 15% in 2 hours. At this rate, the ethereal server would reset long before the creature fell. Ethan's mind raced as fast as his feet. There has to be another way. The thought was cut short by a shout echoing from the entrance tunnel, sharp enough to draw everyone's attention. Holy shit, it's real. A level 95. Quick. Notify the guild master. Bring the whole Swish. Swish. Boom. The excited voice vanished as several spells struck the speaker mid-sentence, reducing him to a flash of departing light. A new group had pushed through the cleared valley and entered the tomb. From their reactions, they were clearly scouts, likely from one of the major Carnage-aligned guilds. Word had spread too quickly. The deaths of the earlier scouts had already triggered verification teams. Even killing these newcomers wouldn't stop the information from spreading now. Major guild forces would arrive soon. Wipe them, Lily Silverwood said coldly. Melee. Seal the entrance tunnel. Chapter 862. Quest completion. Lily's order was sound, but Ethan knew it was only a temporary fix. The entrance tunnel narrowed to a choke point where no more than 4 enemies could advance side by side, and in theory that bottleneck could be held for a very long time, perhaps even indefinitely if everything went perfectly. But nothing ever did. Attrition was the real enemy. Mana potions for the healers and health potions for the front line were being drained at a terrifying pace, and those were not cheap or limitless supplies. No one here had enough to sustain a prolonged siege. If this dragged on, they would lose not to skill or tactics, but to empty belts and dry inventories. The only real solution was to end the fight quickly. Soon, the sounds of battle thundered from the tunnel entrance. Every melee fighter and healer had been pulled into the desperate defense. With so many tanks already dead earlier, holding the line was brutal and exhausting. The cramped space eliminated any hope of ranged support, turning the fight into a close-quarters meat grinder of shields, blades, and screams. The attackers, by contrast, still had disciplined shield walls and spellcasters rotating in support. Lily Silverwood and Emery Shaw exchanged grim looks. Neither said it aloud, but the pressure was mounting by the second. Ethan had already run countless laps around the chamber, mapping every inch of it in his head. There were no safe kiting paths, nowhere to slowly bleed the enemy down. A few elevated ledges existed, but reaching them was one problem, and surviving once there was another. The creature's jumping power was absurd, and its artificial intelligence was sharp enough that it would almost certainly scale the walls after him instead of waiting below like a fool. He split his attention between observing its patterns, adjusting his positioning, and squeezing out every scrap of damage he could. Compared to him, Emery's team barely registered. Their hits were mostly 2-digit numbers, and not a single one of them had landed a triple-digit blow. Against something like this, they might as well have been scratching stone. If the tunnel defense collapsed, thousands of players would pour into this tomb. No matter how strong he was, trapped in a sealed chamber with no escape routes, he would be overwhelmed in moments. And yet there was no alternative. Killing this creature was the only way to get it back. That staff was Leo's exclusive weapon from his ascension quest. Losing it would cripple his future progression. Worse, Ethan strongly suspected that when combined, the orb, the savage staff, and the cosmos cask formed something extraordinary, possibly divine tier, maybe even legendary. They felt like peers to his own Twilight War Spear and Lila's Frostbound Reverie. Ethan, fall back. Leo's private message flashed urgently. Ethan saw it. He chose not to answer. Instead, he planted his feet and raised his spear. Enough games. Let's have a proper fight. The creature froze mid-motion. It let out a furious roar and flung the combined staff high into the air. Before it could fall, the 3 artifacts tore themselves apart, spinning wildly as they separated, then snapped back together into a rotating metallic ring. With a shriek of displaced air, it shot toward Ethan at terrifying speed. What skill is that? Ethan shouted, even as he activated Panther's agility and threw himself sideways. I have no idea. Leo yelled back, sounding just as shocked. There was no time to think. Ethan accelerated, pushing his movement to the limit, but the spinning ring curved smoothly through the air, correcting its trajectory as if alive and locking onto him without hesitation. Damn it! It was too fast. Ding! The 3 artifacts slammed into the ground around Ethan, detonating into a dome of dark energy that swallowed him whole. Ethan! Bro! Leo and Emery shouted at the same time. To everyone watching, the dark light engulfed Ethan completely, and his body dissolved in the unmistakable white flash of player death, the kind that left no corpse behind. Instant disintegration. Ethan was dead. The druid god, the undefeated myth, killed in a single strike right in front of them. No one speaks of this, ever, Lily snapped, issuing the order across guild channels without hesitation. He's not dead, Leo suddenly said, straightening as if something had snapped into place inside him. Lila turned sharply. What? The monster's gone too. Amid the chaos, someone else finally noticed the second absence. The creature that had risen from the coffin had vanished without a trace. Skyblade? You're okay? Emery asked slowly, staring at Leo's steadier posture and clearer eyes. Leo nodded. You guys should pull out. I need to head back to our side. Not sure when Ethan will be back. The first part made sense. The last part left Emery completely baffled. Leo knew, though. Just like last time with the Crowleying god, Ethan had not died. He had been taken, dragged somewhere else by that monster. But your quest? Emery pressed, worry cutting through his confusion. Already finished, Leo replied with a grin. He opened his hand, revealing the milky white orb of spirits resting calmly on his palm. The instant Ethan and the monster vanished, a system notification had appeared before his eyes. Quest complete. In his inventory sat all 3 items, the orb, the savage staff, and the cosmos cask. They were back. Leo muttered under his breath. Hope that keeps his promise and stops bugging me for drinks. Long before this quest ever began, Ethan's avatar had sought Leo out personally. It guided him to the quest's starting point and insisted that he drag the real Ethan along. When Leo had asked why the avatar could not simply tell Ethan itself, the answer had been vague and unsettling. We're getting too close. I can't intervene directly anymore. That had been the last time Leo saw it. Even then, its mannerisms had felt slightly wrong, as if something else were pulling its strings. It promised to stop haunting Leo with frequent tavern visits if he helped. Reluctantly, Leo had agreed, setting the whole scheme in motion. He had expected a tedious excavation job. He had not expected this. Another disappearance. Instead of dread, Leo felt a strange spark of anticipation. What change would Ethan bring back this time? His quest rewards updated again. Only one item appeared, a pill labeled Grave King's Ascension Elixir. There was no tier listed and no description at all. It was soulbound, usable only by him. What is this? A theory took shape in his mind. The extreme suppression he had felt earlier, the way his body had resisted him, all of it tied back to his real-world condition. Could this evolve him? After a quick farewell to Emery, Leo activated the quest-granted Hearthstone and vanished in a spiral of light. Emery's group followed shortly after, using their own recall items and abandoning the handful of brave players still holding the tunnel. One by one, the remaining defenders disappeared safely. Moments later, Carnage faction scouts pushed through the tunnel, finding the resistance suddenly gone. They surged forward eagerly, expecting battle and spoils. They burst into the tomb chamber and found nothing. The vast room stood empty. The rumored level 95 world boss had vanished without leaving a single trace behind. Chapter 863. A Hair from the Monkey King. The moment the dark light swallowed him, Ethan knew what was coming. Here we go again. The sensation of teleportation, or perhaps of being torn apart and rebuilt molecule by molecule, was no longer unfamiliar. For one terrifying instant, he felt his entire body ionize. His consciousness stretched thin across countless drifting particles. Then weight returned. Shape returned. His vision slammed back into place as his body reassembled, and a wave of violent nausea rolled through him, so intense he nearly blacked out. He was on his knees. Lying motionless on the scorched ground in front of him was the withered monkey creature that had chased him for hours. His twisted limbs were still. No health bar hovered above it. It was dead. Heh. Heh. Looking the wrong way, kid. The raspy voice sounded like dry feathers scraping stone. Came from behind him. Ethan spun around too fast, and the sudden motion sent his stomach lurching. He barely managed to stay upright as the world steadied. He was standing on a small obsidian platform, smooth and unnaturally black. Beyond its edges stretched a vast lake of molten magma, bubbling and churning as far as the eye could see, casting a hellish red glow over everything. His gaze lifted. 2 colossal stone pillars rose from the lava like ancient fangs, their surfaces scorched and cracked. Thick chains, each as wide as a man's torso, wrapped around them in countless layers. Suspended between the pillars, bound by those chains, hung a figure. It was humanoid, but only barely. Its sharp features were unmistakably monkey-like, its face long and angular, with eyes that burned like living embers. When it grinned, the expression twisted into something grotesque rather than friendly. For fangs jutted from its mouth, 2 above and 2 below, catching the crimson light. That's a person? Ethan thought, his instincts screaming at him to stay alert. You! He started, then faltered. Heh! So you're the brat that Dorn Lucan's little puppet dragged in? The chained figure cut in, its voice dripping with disdain. Dorn Lucan. The name sounded familiar, but it meant nothing to him. And a puppet? Ethan felt like he had missed several chapters of a story everyone else already knew. Heh! Looks like you don't even know that runt's real name, the figure continued, eyes flickering with amusement. He calls himself. What was it again? Right. Morzan. Morzan. Ethan repeated, the name hitting him like a hammer. His eyes widened as he seemed to recall something. Dorn Lucan. Was that the leader of the Abyss Order? The one mentioned in those historical references. His thoughts spiraled. Dorn Lucan. The name surfaced from half-forgotten myths. A legendary figure forever depicted with a wine gourd, said to be a ruler from an ancient era long forgotten. The so-called god of wine. According to legend, he achieved divinity through brewing and ascended, leaving no tomb behind. Bullshit. The chained figure barked, as if reading his mind. That runt drank a batch of wine some woman brewed, passed out cold, and by sheer dumb luck slipped the bonds of the path of ethereal. Too scared to use his real name, he picked a ridiculous title like Morzan. And you idiots worship him as some divine sage of spirits? Pathetic. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. It wasn't just mockery. The creature really could hear his surface thoughts. Those emberlit eyes were locked onto him with unsettling precision. The sharp simian features, the voice, the overwhelming presence. His gaze flicked downward instinctively, even though the chains blocked his view. He was almost certain there was a tail. You. Ethan hesitated, then took a breath. Would your surname happen to be Sun? The creature froze for a fraction of a second. Then it laughed. Heh, so you're not completely brain-dead after all. Since you figured that out, you probably want to know why I dragged you here. The confirmation hit Ethan harder than he expected. A name he had grown up with. A legend. A childhood idol that almost everyone was familiar with. Now chained in hellfire before his eyes. To rescue you? Ethan ventured carefully, forcing respect into his voice. From this place. Ha ha ha. The laughter boomed across the magma lake, echoing off the pillars until Ethan felt it in his bones. Rescue me? With that scrawny body. The monkey sneered. If you could pull that off, this wouldn't be the Maya hell. Enough nonsense. Those cowards are too afraid to speak. I'm not. You're lucky I left a single hair back on the ancestral star. Otherwise, Dorn Lucan's little puppet wouldn't have been able to stir up all this mess. As he spoke, a sudden breeze brushed against Ethan's back. He turned. The corpse of the monkey creature was gone. In its place, hovering just above the ground, was a single strand of golden hair. It shimmered faintly, warm and alive, radiating an unmistakable power. Take it, the chained figure said. One use left. Don't waste it. As for why you're here, I wanted to deliver a warning myself. Watch out for the feathered ones. If you can kill them, kill every last one you see. Ah! Crack. The instant the words feathered ones left his mouth, the stone pillars erupted with blinding arcs of lightning. The bolts raced along the chains, converging violently on the chained figure. His roar of pain tore through the air, raw and furious. Hey! He growled as the lightning finally faded. Your granddaddies lived as long as heaven and earth. You think a little shock can finish me? Keep dreaming. Foolish ape. A cold voice answered from above. Even in chains, your tongue remains foul. I have slumbered for centuries. It seems it is time to remind you of your place. The fiery clouds parted. A shaft of golden light speared downward, and within it descended a figure. Not a man. A being with 4 radiant white wings. A seraph. His presence crushed the air itself. The obsidian platform felt smaller, weaker, as if it might crack under the weight of that divine authority. Who were you speaking to, monkey? The seraph asked calmly, its gaze sweeping across the platform. Its eyes passed directly over Ethan. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. The Monkey King bound and tortured before him. A real angel, one the monkey had just warned him to kill on sight. The pressure radiating from the seraph was suffocating, absolute. Escape felt impossible. And yet, the seraph's gaze continued onward. It didn't pause. It didn't narrow. It didn't see him. The chained monkey spat toward the angel. Pa! If I wasn't stuck here, a bug like you wouldn't dare open your mouth. I'd piss you into dust. Insolent beast, the seraph said, voice hardening. Your tongue will be your undoing. Heaven's judgment. It raised one hand. A golden sword formed instantly within its grasp. A thunderbolt tore down from the crimson sky, striking the blade. With a sharp, snapping motion, the seraph lashed the lightning forward. White light consumed everything. Ethan felt himself dissolve again as the world shattered. When his senses returned, the first thing he saw was the inside of his VR capsule. He was no longer in ethereal. He gagged, the lingering vertigo overwhelming him as he fumbled with the latch. The hatch sprang open, and he spilled onto the floor, gasping and retching as his body struggled to remember gravity. That angel! It couldn't see me? The thought cut through the nausea like a blade. He stayed there for a long time, flat on the cool floor, staring at the ceiling while the room slowly stopped spinning. Eventually, he forced himself up, staggered into the bathroom, and stood under a stream of cold water until his breathing steadied. Feeling marginally human again, he left his room. The house was silent. Morning sunlight poured through the windows, soft and golden. Lila, Amber, Rainy, Uncle Jed, Regis. No one was home. Frowning, Ethan extended his soul sense, sweeping outward in a wide arc. 10 kilometers. Then more. Nothing. No familiar presences. No movement. Just an eerie, suffocating emptiness. The only thing that reassured him was Shatterstar, still hovering invisibly above him, steady and unchanged. He stepped outside into the garden. And froze. How long was I gone? He had missed it during his scan, too focused on people. Now the details hit him all at once. The garden was overflowing with life. Thick grass, lush and vibrant, brushed against his boots. Leaves glistened in the sunlight. He distinctly remembered deep winter when he had logged into Ethereal yesterday. He knelt slowly and ran his fingers through the grass. It bent under his touch. Cool Eve. It was real, not an illusion. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.